Good evening, and welcome to the Marine Minor Cook Athenaeum. My name is Henrietta Toivonen, and I'm one of the Ath Fellows this year. The identity and geopolitical power balances of Eurasia, comprised of Europe and Asia, have shifted from one century to another, as seen in the Silk Road, as well as in the continent's current rapid transformation. Tonight, we will focus on the social geography of the continent and its visualization as an urban structure. Our speaker, Kyong Park, is a professor of public culture at the University of California at San Diego. He incorporates visual arts, architecture, theory, and curatorial practices in his work, and uses different media, from text and photography to video and installations, in his approach to public spaces. His first project was the founding of Storefront for Art and Architecture in New York. He has also directed and curated projects in Detroit, Berlin, Istanbul, Tokyo, and a wide range of other cities across the world, which have included collaboration with activists, community organizations, and universities. Professor Park's current project, Imaging New Eurasia, conceives new relations between the East and the West, and a renewed identity of Eurasia as a whole. As always, I must remind you that audio and visual recording is strictly prohibited. Please join me in welcoming Professor Park to the Athenaeum.
Hello. Very happy to be here, and I'm very thankful to be invited to speak to you about a few projects that I can talk about tonight. And so let me, since we don't have much time, let me just begin with that. Okay. So the two projects that I'm going to talk about, one is called the New Silk Road, and the other is called Imagining New Eurasia. They're linked together, and obviously this project that I'm first going to show is the beginning of this, my, let's say, investigation of some sort. It began with several trips through these cities region, and over 2007 and 2008. And of course, you know, we have been thinking, and much have been discussed and written about how, let's say, economic rise of Asia, and what did that mean in terms of the shifting relation between East and West. So I felt that a project called New Silk Roads would be appropriate title to investigate this very complex and immensely broad subject. So what I really tried to do was to research more like a field work. In fact, I traveled through these cities most of the time with bicycle, not between the cities, I flew them. But I took a bicycle, and so that I could just go wherever I felt like going without a set prior research and itinerary. Kind of like, let's say, a situationalist would do as a sort of verite, deconstructing city according to your own perceptions and intention. So what I call is sort of a nomadic practice of some sort, and so I experienced these cities and its people and the landscape, urban landscape, through photography, video, and also interviews with some local and international experts. As a result of this work was actually presented in a museum called Contemporary Museum in Castilla y León in Spain. That's the, in fact, that architecture of that building is very, very impressive. It actually won Mies van der Rohe Award as the best architecture in Europe. I think it was in 2004 when it opened. So I'm going to go through this very quickly because I have a lot of things to show. So we can actually have a Q&A later for more specific. So the exhibition entrance, I basically laid out a kind of an image, a topographical image of Asia, in which that actually people walk through it before they enter the major portion of the exhibition. Well, under suggestion or the dictation from my curator, Octavio Zaya, he wanted to sort of set up a somewhat little bit informal exhibition. So he asked me to kind of transport the studio where I developed and researched this project. So we sort of made up this place, which I call information is the key to global and human transformation. So a series of desks were set up, like kind of a laboratory of some sort. And they were, primarily the objective was to, let's say, to create a kind of a fluid point of observation of different places' territory. And that is kind of reflected in the way the exhibition was set up. Primarily what my view of what I was looking at and researching was that the purpose was to avoid the kind of a perspectival view of the world from one point only, and to generate diverse and differentiated observation from multiple point of view that are actually moving. So I'm an observer that moves between the cities and try to understand it from that movement as opposed to from a static view. So the city remains static in one place while I move in between, because in reality what I always thought was that you cannot understand a city unless that if you saw another city. So the comparative view really is what is necessary to develop certain objective about your own city. On the working table, working with an architect, Peruvian architect, Giacomo Castagnoli, there was simply just some books and photocopies of material that I used to travel with. Of course, typical tourist maps are also included. And in a way to begin to invite the material to be interpreted by the visitors, perhaps that they could actually construct their own idea about what New Silk Road may be, projecting off from my own material. There were also videos, 5 of them, that were done by an artist, Alexandra Lerman, who traveled with me through the Central Asia. And they were specifically some things about, especially about regarding to political transformation after the post-Soviet Union. And then a wall was kind of recreated, so to speak, during the research time preparing for the exhibition. There obviously, we used the wall to put up material to reflect and to strategize and to design overall exhibition. In the exhibition, also, there was this couple of graphics, large graphic works were made. Actually, they're about 1.5 meter by 10 meter long. And this one is particularly about using the line graphs, very traditional, constructed on 3 layers. And it represents about idea between geographical and topographical condition of the continent, and presenting various data that are related to understand how the geography and cartography had impacted on explorations and exploitation of Asia as territory and resources. And obviously this goes through issues like colonial period of Asia. Basically, this map is composed of manipulating maps of Asia from GIS. And then, for example, cutting a cross-section across continent of Asia, and it's big exaggerated, you can see in the center in the gray lines, suggesting maybe perhaps that one could emulate certain kind of travel across, which and what kind of experience and obstacles that may be involved. The blue area represents how geography itself determines how we understand and perceive experience of our movement across Asia, like it may have been during the time of Old Silk Road. The red area on top of it is visualizing my own travel, which is contemporary, fragmented, and roundabout. And this creates a kind of a folding effect, folding of the continent into recomposed orders that is no longer actual physical land itself. Purpose, I guess, is in that manner is that how our own movements really redefines our geography constantly today, or reconfigure or recompose physical geography into what would be called experiential geography, where geography becomes dynamic and ephemeral instead something that is fixed and permanent. In fact, one could say actual geography actually no longer has any importance if you take that idea to the extreme. Various data is about 10 locations along the New Silk Road, actually 8 cities and 2 countries, are shown together in a collection of line graphics and certain information that are categorized according to 4 categories of land, people, culture, and economics. So it's a rather kind of data-based work, which is presented in the visual form to understand graphically certain relationship between certain data. So overall, completely, it would look something like this. And along the way, there were, on this graphic work, various short phrases that were collected from different readings were positioned along with these graphics to actually kind of contextualize these data into different issues concerning politics, let's say economics, and other issues of the national developments and even urbanization. This other graphic was really about, also based on 10 geographical locations, but they're organized rather kind of horizontally in a sense to think more about these cities and how that materials from the land of Asia were actually processed and manufactured and produced and was distributed as a commodity. These bar graphics have specific data about these cities and region, and they're also overlaid with a certain common value system according to specific title of the data. Let's see. Actually, this graphic was kind of intentionally to emulate perhaps what looks like urban developments, let's say a cityscape, architecture, buildings, or even the kind of urban layout of the city. And then the next work was basically also one of the work that I did was that to take a panoramic photographs of these cities that I traveled through, and creating these into a continuous digital scroll. In other words, one city links into another. And this is a model of it, but it was a way to present kind of Asian city as one city, almost seamless and endless. So this is installation of that where the images move across the screen and feeding continuously into another, as if you would take a traditional, let's say what we remember as a traditional Chinese or Korean scroll painting. Again, this movement, very slight, with a slight zoom and in and out, produces a certain kind of dynamic quality out of this still image of photograph. And this creates a sort of sensation of conflict between immobility of these physical spaces that I'm portraying and the nomadic condition of its viewer like me. And the static images in the movements also suggest the fleeting quality of a particular time of that city or a time that I have actually photographed these cities as well. So for example, this is a Tokyo. And so there's also text overlaid that creates a relationship between the image that you see and the words that I have put over. This is actually a Swedish town built outside of Shanghai. There's a number of these cities have been built from around 2005. And it shows a kind of certain imagination that China is not only, but of course in Korea as well, and I'm sure in Japan and elsewhere, imagine sort of Western fantasies about lifestyle and homesteading. Southern California, by the way, is the most idealistic landscape for East Asian, probably also as well as UAE society as well. And this is a very interesting place where I found, actually thanks to Google Map, I found that in Delhi, Delhi has at least 7 old cities. A new city was never built on top of the other one. In most cities, that's the case. They just built another one a little bit over somewhere else. This one particular city, I have no idea about its history, but it was totally abandoned. There was not even tourist, not even sign. But in the center of a very large city, which was completely now filled with sediments, there was a new informal village being built by people themselves. This is Istanbul, not anything particular historically dramatic that you might remember, but I found a kind of interesting relation between the landscape, the topography, and Islamic cemetery, and these housings were essentially in the past was informal slum area that over the time have matured because the state never has enough funds to accommodate housing for rapidly urbanizing population during a developing phase of the city. Of course, suburb of Beijing. Beijing is basically a sprawl city, actually not probably that much different from Los Angeles area, ever expanding, but of course, it's defined by Forbidden City and its rectangular shape that extends out. So instead of circular ring proliferation, is more rectangular shape. Constant building expansion of the city into the suburbs. And Dubai. And these are also kind of like showing up, let's say, presenting urban landscape of what one may consider as exploding city. This is Astana in Kazakhstan, which is actually a new capital. They moved from Almaty. It's kind of a reconstruction of Kazakhs in a way by moving the capital way up north where the great deal of natural gas and other energy resources are located. It's also where most of the Russian population still remains. So in a way, kind of a politically projecting Kazakh onto toward the post-colonial state. International architects of fame are invited to build, let's say, a pyramid, for example. Presidential palace, I should have closer photos, that looks like a combination of White House and undersized Capitol. So there's many photographs, and so one of the things that I've done is, the other part of it is that more than 1,400 photographs were basically programmed to project itself and compose its own self, crop and zoom in, zoom out, basically by computer program instead of myself editing them. And with that, also certain keywords that are very, let's say, not necessarily problematic, contradictory, but more critically challenging with the images. And they're constantly running. In fact, this work, actually, it could run almost infinity and it would never be the same because the computer would randomly reorganize them. The idea here was kind of simple, like the title, that city no longer can be captured by few spectacular, beautiful, and monumental photographs, but instead thousands of images that are relatively benign and unique, and anybody can do it. In fact, that's what we currently do, with our own smartphones and also other social media network. So these are kind of some stills from images and how that different, very simple categorization took place, like demolition, construction, then new, and then let's say skyscrapers. There's some really fantastic architectural design during the Soviet period, as well as, you see one building from Singapore here, right? And of course in Shenzhen, they love gold-built skyscrapers, and the old history that still remains somewhat, yet maybe some of them untainted by global tourism. Of course, the kitsch architecture like this in China, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Korea. Walls that defines and shape the city, segregates, organize the population and the subject to the state, for example, state government. Obviously, people move around, within the city in different forms. You get to encounter a lot of alternative vehicles that may be low-tech, but probably much more sustainable in the end. People are always working, like, let's say, Central Asia was one of the issues, was that it was designated as a cotton industry by the Soviet politics, and so on. And interestingly, it's not my intention to take portraits, but when you travel like that and you're walking around with a camera, a lot of people likes to talk to you and they want to have their photos taken. So it also became part of my work through the landscape. So let's go to now Imagining New Eurasia. So what I realized that New Silk Road was actually not there was a mistake in that project, which is that I didn't consider importance of Europe as a part of my interest and investigation. So Imagining New Eurasia is basically a notion about that try to visualize currently changing conditions and relationship between Europe and Asia. So this, well, the old Silk Road maybe have been, so what I begin to see when I was doing New Silk Road, ironically, I was really not that interested in Old Silk Road. People always ask me about how my work now refers to Old Silk Road. But now with the Imagining New Eurasia, I begin to realize that Old Silk Road is not a historical nostalgia, but is actually very important cultural, economic, and political history that actually could project the future of Eurasia, meaning that Europe and Asia as a one single continent and with a shared history. So this exhibition and this project actually takes place in a new cultural center called Asian Culture Center in Gwangju, South Korea, which is a mega project where Korean government is spending something like $1 billion excess. And my exhibition is just a small part of it, but I have been commissioned for 3 years to do actually 3 successive exhibitions. And the first one is called Here, There, and Everywhere. Its subtitle is Eurasian Cities. So that was the entrance into the exhibition. And here is the general, this is what you see when you enter that corridor. And this exhibition has 3 parts. I have to finish this by like 7:30, 7:40? 7:30, okay. This part has 3 parts. One is called Atlas of New Geography, and which is what you see in the front of this kind of a round thing on a small little individual tables here. And this was actually a work that came from, I made an open competition because I wanted to get works from different parts of Eurasia, and I didn't really have enough time to really do this because I was only commissioned this, what was it, like April 2015. I had to put up the show by November. And so open competition sort of seemed to make sense strategy. So I made a kind of a premise, and the premise was that let's imagine that Eurasia has been completely, totally destroyed, possibly from religious, ethnic, and national wars, even maybe nuclear war. As a result, unaccountable numbers of cities, towns, villages lie in ruin, and all forms of state, community, and belief have been vanished. The grandest civilization in the world upon the largest continent on the globe was simply erased. Perhaps the idea of Eurasia was not strong enough to sustain a peaceful coexistence of its parts. The last sentence is that Eurasia is not a very strong identity. It's not an identity strong enough collectively to build something like European Union. Eurasia was considered to be a land between Europe and Asia. So the rest of the premise of the competition is, fortuitously, I have a hard time pronouncing that, a new Eurasia could arise from the few specks of our cultural artifacts and memories that have survived, here, there, and everywhere. Of course, we know from anthropologists that nothing of civilization or old city completely disappears. But what could they be? And how can they shape new cities, towns, and villages? So, Imagining New Eurasia project invites you to send us your ideas, drawings, sketches, text, artworks, found objects, photographs, maps, memorabilia, or other kinds of artifacts from which your city, towns, or villages could be rebuilt and reimagined. So we wanted to get the idea of kind of not only try to build the identity of Eurasia, but also maybe we could imagine new Eurasia as well. So we have gotten quite a bit of work, and out of that we choose 85 works from 77 cities and 41 countries. And there was a competition, prize money. It was decided on public online voting, kind of inspired by Eurovision Song Contest. That was really enormously popular. In fact, that was what actually merged Europe, East and West together well before European Union. And the work was basically kind of created an atlas of localized and personal visions and ideas about New Eurasia. And the way we displayed it was we basically bought used tables and used furnitures from old furniture stores in Gwangju. And that, for the purpose of that, was kind of intentionally downsize these global ideas to a personal scale, and also to host works from distant cities upon objects that are very culturally, socially connected with everyday life of Korean society. Because these tables have a lot of memories, certain particular type of tables, whether it was a table where everybody drank till the morning, or it's a table that students agonize to study, or it's a table that you have to meet your hierarchical opponent in Confucius society of Korea. The second part of the exhibition was called City Mix, and is comprised of built a kind of a panoramic pavilion, and inside I used my old panoramic photos and videos of selected Eurasian cities and created a kind of environment of urban landscape that are joined, merged, or compounded to create progressions, mixtures, and amalgamation of different cities of the continent into essentially one globalized city that is mixed and is no longer singular nor independent. The exterior of the skin of this pavilion, 100 selected cities, their city shape or the territorial profile was projected as into a kinetic fabric skin, as you can see, that portrayed kind of a timeline of the old Silk Road and new Silk Road, presenting the oldest city to the newest city. And then inside the panoramics were projected in 360 video screen. And it was inspired by the panoramas and dioramas that were popular in the second half of the 19th century. But rather than presenting landscape of one particular city as the traditional panorama did, or particular landscape, this pavilion mixed them, different cities, to create comparative and combined landscape. Third part of the exhibition was, boy, I better move quickly, was called Urban Poetry, where thousands of cards of images on one side and words on the other side are found at the final part of this exhibition. It was acquired through scripted search on internet that we developed to collect particular types of images, and 150 selected cities that were important, Old Silk Road, New Silk Road, and other continental roads were displayed. And people are invited to take these images and create a kind of a collective poetry on this wall, kind of like, refrigerator poetry, right? Magnetic stickers, right? And on the other, therefore, they're combining a certain kind of phrases that may be connected to the notions of Eurasia. But on the other side, it creates an image of Eurasia that is constantly changing and mixed mosaic of urban images, so that it's a sort of a kind of attempt to, ad hoc attempt to define a visual identity to what may be Eurasia. So let me show you maybe some examples of what was projected inside. I guess I have to escape this first. Inside of the video, panoramas. So for example, let me see. Can we turn this light off for a moment? This light? Can we turn this light off? Thank you. So here's the two cities, let's say Shenzhen and Delhi, in which they are mixing together in between, let's say the one previously, between a high-rise and low-rise city, modernity versus rather underdeveloped environment. This is Tokyo, Astana, Shanghai, and maybe one other city I can't remember, are sort of recomposing itself on top of each other. So what it's doing is that then it is actually destroying a city underneath, rebuilding a new city on top. Actually, this is just the Kowloon side of Hong Kong. And creating new spaces between actual cities that are more imaginary and fantasy, but at the same time, one can think about what might exist actually between different cities in terms of the influences of aesthetics and designs and its own identity. So 8 cities were depicted, the growth of 8 different cities were also depicted and projected in the pavilion. And that was Moscow and Moskova, but there's also other cities. And this is actually, sorry. I'm going to turn off the audio so that we could use this to start Q&A. Just a second. Okay. I'm not on HDMI, right? Okay. So I can take a Q&A now. You can actually turn off the light, please. That's okay. I think people can still see me. They can watch this. Any questions?
If you have a question, please raise your hand and we'll come to you with a microphone. Priority goes to students.
First of all, thank you so much for coming here tonight. Your exhibitions are really interesting. What I'm really curious about is what personally inspired you to focus on looking at Eurasias, looking at cities, looking at growth, combining them. If there's any anecdote, like what basically inspired you to focus your career on this?
Well, I think this, cities have been my primary interest for some time. And whether that I am considered as an artist or somebody with architectural background or other type of work, that I find cities to be the most interesting subject to investigate if we are understand about ourselves. I consider important cities in two different ways. One is that the cities are the best film ever made and will be ever made. In fact, it was made before film was ever created. It's a film or a cinema in which that all the senses and the colors are always present. It's actually fully three-dimensional and totally interactive. In other words, that I can interact with you and so on at real time, obviously. It is also a film in which that I am the director, but I'm also an audience at the same time. And there's multiple films going on, in fact, as many as the human populations are going on all at the same time. In other words, each one of us have our own film running in our lifetime, and we're now encountering here about 60 films at one time in single space in the same time, right? The other thing why cities are important to me is because it is the best and greatest book of our history. Unlike most history, it is not, sorry, I don't want to say anything about Department of History, but or historians, but history is subjective and it itself is historical, meaning that many different regimes, especially political regime, in fact, there's one going on in Korea about rewriting history officially, has been written over and reinterpreted in a different way by whoever was in power or what else, right? And who is the empire, so to speak. So there are multiple history, not one that is honest and one, right? But city holds all that history in itself through its architecture, through its artifacts, through its remains, and through its own imagination. So it is the most full and complete maybe, and most honest and accurate history that we may have, right? So those are two reasons why I'm interested. Obviously, city is the way that we live and the place in which we live, and a place that, or thing that in which we project our future to. And so it has almost everything that you could imagine associative you could do as interdisciplinary practice. So that is some of the few reasons why that I am very much continue to work and research and some kind of a product from that about the cities. Yeah. And I also forgot to kind of mention that other aspect. Maybe I will explain. Yes.
Thank you for your talk. In a lot, obviously, you've talked a lot about like the continuity of one city into another, the sort of idea almost of combining cities. You also demonstrated a lot of commonalities in terms of interesting growth and, you know, size skyscrapers, all of these things. Is this shared Eurasian identity that you've been talking about something that you're more projecting as what you expect, or is it something that you would see as a hopeful shared identity, something that would be positive? I guess, is it more like prescriptive, or is it more something that you think would be like a positive for like the shared continent?
Well, I mean, it's hard to imagine that I could actually project some kind of demand in any time in history or a land like Eurasia, right? I mean, but I'm really looking at observing, for instance, that you know, we have to realize that Alexander the Great was all the way to Indus River in 200 BC or 250 BC. There was a Hellenic state with Hellenic language and culture established and lasted about 250 years in current Afghanistan, right, called Bactria. Mongols reached all the way, the furthest battle that they lost was in Poland. Timur Empire was quite expansive to both east and west. Of course, many Persian empires and those Timurs were in the center of the continent. If we think about the Western European colonialism that absorbed more than 60% of Asia, it is, and more other examples, obviously I'm missing, is that Europe and Asia had a history that was really shared, right? And I forgot, actually, maybe I should continue answering your question through this way. Back to presentation. Europe and Asia was thought to be divided into two parts ever since the Hellenic period, 6th century BC. So this is the venerable T and O map that have existed since that time. But you know, this is kind of boundary description discrepancies between where is the actual division between Europe and Asia. But if you take into consideration, in fact, the reason why those urban portrait cards, they have different colors, right? I forgot to mention that we didn't actually categorize those images in the boxes according to the cities, but we actually categorize according to colors. And that color is actually median temperature of that city, which we got from this kind of stupid, you know, stuff you find in Google. The reason why is that people like, let's say, Jared Diamond in his Guns and Germs and Steel basically proclaimed that the reason why that Eurasian people were very, let's say, successive and ambitious is not because of their particular kind of a race or biological, let's say, advantages, more in, let's say, more in the polite terms, but instead because of the features of the Eurasian continent itself, particularly that east and west axis, okay, which favor the spread of domestications, people, technologies, inventions over long distance with a little change in climate, okay, as opposed to North and South continent like Africa or Americas. So the Silk Road, in a sense, as I mentioned, that is not a nostalgic item anymore, is that in this condition of dominance of horizontal over vertical, in the form of movements, the connective condition of Eurasia rules over divisive tendencies. In other words, you know, where is the division of Europe and Asia, which is totally inconsequential. In fact, it's a historical construction. Eurasia, thus, is a continent that tends to integrate its parts rather than push them apart. Therefore, geography of Eurasia is naturally producing unifying energy. The Silk Road, the historical spine that once connected to end of Eurasia and everything in between, is actually a literal manifestation of the unifying metaphysics of Eurasia. Okay. I'm glad you asked this question because I think I can answer this, maybe try to answer this properly. Today, the idea of Eurasia as a unifier is returned through, whether you agree or not, one road, one belt idea, a geopolitical project by the People's Republic of China, mainly the Communist Party. A proposal to build new railroads and highways across Eurasia, including to South Africa and to Patagonia in South America. This is some considered to be the most important geopolitical strategy of the world since the Cold War, the Marshall Plan. And thus far, I'm not probably listing all of it. Let's say $40 billion New Silk Road Fund was established by PRC. I think it's early 2015. The Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank was established with $100 billion Chinese investments. American government told its allies not to join the AIIB. But I think England joined it first, and then Italy and the French and other European countries joined. In fact, one of the most, I wouldn't say controversial, but very bold step was that South Korea joined AIIB. Okay. And what that means is basically that China is pulling the North American friends to in the Chinese influence and spheres. AIIB actually is also the counter World Bank system against ADB, which is Asian Development Bank, which is headed by Japanese domination. Of course, World Bank and IMF is the other alternative, which is dominated by either USA or Europe, Western Europe. So AIIB is a kind of a making of an alternative World Bank institution under PRC's founding and oversee control. The idea about what they wanted to do, as you can see in the new Silk Road infrastructure ambitions, and this is not without a problem. I mean, actually, Burma rejected Chinese proposal to build railroads there. And what PRC is contending is that their idea is about integration rather than division. And this is a way that China is seeing itself as the future building of making itself as the future global power. We have now, basically, as of November 18th, 2014, there was a train of 82 containers that left the city of Yihu, which is 300 kilometers south of Shanghai, which is actually a massive trading center city. Arrived in Madrid in November 9th, I think like something like 22 days. Traveling over 13,000 kilometers, making it the longest regular train route in the world, 2,000 kilometers further than previous longest, which was between Kiev and Vladivostok. Putin has proposed to build tunnel and bridges across Bering Strait to connect to North America. I mean, I don't think his interest is more about North America, it's more about South America, so the Chinese resource appetite would indicate. But this is not some kind of a crazy, lunatic, unrealizable idea from Mr. Bear himself, but it is actually an idea that existed since the Tsarist time, even before building of the what's the railroad across to Russia, Trans-Siberian Railroad, right? There used to be old road, T road, even before that spanned across. And of course, that was a time when Alaska actually belonged to Russia. So I think that in some ways that longevity and persistence of this idea may someday manifest in reality because of necessity in which the China is projecting to the world. Why is this so important? Because in 1904, a geographer, Halford Mackinder, a British geographer, made a very famous speech. It's called Geographical Pivot of History. And this was at the end of the colonial era, in other words, after the scramble for Africa or something, was it? Where the whole world now is completely colonized. There's no more new land to colonize. How are we going to get along with each other without conflicts between our colonial imperial powers? So it's kind of like what you call Westphalian Treaty, similar to that, mutual agreement. And what this said was, one could say that this was the first world order image, was that the sea power would be over, that is British Empire. The power of world struggle would return back to the land, maybe it's like kind of back to Mongolian state. And whoever controlled this pivot area, which is in the center of Eurasia, will control the world, right? So it's what China is proposing, in a sense, is, in a practical sense, it's like competing against ocean cargo shipping line through railroads, right? Obviously, China is interested, actually, blocking of the Malacca Strait, Suez Canal, et cetera, right? So they want to build alternative route to Europe, right, and elsewhere. In my opinion, the war between Afghan to Syria since, 2001, so to speak, is that the Western powers' interest to create a wedge between Russia and China, between China and Europe. And the building of the railroads obviously would not be achieved between unfriendly states. To be able to accommodate these connections, you have to have a state, adjacent states, to actually agree politically, diplomatically, economically, right? So in some strange way, that I think actually, whether that you believe in Communist Party or remade Republican Party under Donald Trump, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it's that the idea of that strategy, infrastructure as a strategy to world peace might be the best choice we have so far. Right? And if you see the map of the proposed railroad through Central Asia, you know Central Asia, 5 stans, Soviet divided up at least 3 of them in a very complicated tangle, like a knotting in Fergana Valley. The Chinese are actually not intent to go through Kazakhstan straight to Russia or Kazakhstan to Turkmenistan to Iran, but actually going through all 5 of those states in a kind of a long, winding route. Why is that? They feel it's important to have a relationship politically as well as just getting stuff from one straight line to Europe. You know? So they're interested in this integration. Of course, this is going to be very difficult with all the conflicts that are now in between Afghanistan to Syria. These are, in other words, that the old Silk Road, when it was fully functional, that if you can run a silk from, let's say, even from Korea to Rome or something, is that it meant that all the territories or states in between them were in agreement and cooperation. When it was cut up, and not fully functional all the way end to end, it is a measure of the conflict in the world, right? This is what I mean is that the Old Silk Road is not a nostalgic remnant, but it is actually might be indicating something more maybe hopeful for the future. So thank you very much for the question, because I forgot about this part of the presentation.
I actually had a question myself. Did someone else? So the political aspects or geopolitical aspects that you just talked about, how do you try to convey that in your work? And do you see your own work as political or trying to influence or create influence?
I'm sorry, I didn't completely get the last half of that.
Oh, well, how do you see politics in your own work? Trying to influence them or
influence who would I be or should be trying to influence?
Do you try to send a message, I guess, a political message with your work?
Yeah, well, I guess as an artist or let's say intellectual, if I am, I don't know, our influence is very limited, you know. Obviously, that it would be very interesting for me to try to convince the state at a upper level to maybe research and investigate what this means globally or even nationally, let's say, for instance, South Korea, right? Which is isolated from the mainland because of North Korea. It's basically an island. It's disconnected from the mainland. Japan is also very much interested in connecting to the mainland, right? So it seems to be that, you know, yeah, you got to talk to the politicians, right? But that's not so easy, right? So I think the opportunity like this, where I get to speak about some of this idea to the next generation of people who would determine major issues of this country and other countries that people have come from, right? And maybe that my ideas or thoughts may have some interest and some relevancy to them, and that maybe that it would be carried, some speck of it would carry into making of the better world from themselves, which would be making a better world for even myself. Yeah. Thank you.
If there are no more questions, please join me in thanking Professor Kyong Park.
Thank you.